Welcome to the Alex Merced cast, where Alex Merced of AlexMerced.com brings you principled, thoughtful, libertarian commentary on issues that matter.
Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMerced.com, and you're listening to another episode of the Alex Merced cast. And yes, that's my cocktail Wally in the background, always spouting off random libertarian lines. I think right now he's yelling taxation is theft there in the background. And then again, if you hear any sirens along the way, again, as a reminder, I live in Brooklyn in a small apartment, so there really isn't a private space away from the bird or the sounds of Brooklyn to really have at the moment. So if you want to have a help to make sure that maybe one day that is the case, what you can do is you can head on over to patreon.com/AlexMerced and become a patron. Okay, that way I can make content more often and, better content. So, okay, now I'm going to put Wally on my shoulder so that way you don't have to hear him contribute and scream taxation is theft in the background. But he still will. But anyway, so what I want to talk about today is going to be another double episode between the Alex Merced cast and the Bitcoin blockchain crypto podcast. The reason being is I have another thing I want to say that's relevant to both podcasts and the listeners of both podcasts. All stemming back from that same episode of the Contra Krugman podcast, which if you don't listen to the Contra Krugman podcast, you really should. Every week you get to hear Tom Woods and Robert Murphy talk about cool stuff in criticizing Paul Krugman in his New York Times column. But referring to that same episode where they discussed Krugman's take on Bitcoin, last week what I did is I talked about how basically what is the problem that blockchain solves. So does the technology solve a problem, or is it just technology that's just creates the possibility of a libertarian world and libertarians, and it's only really libertarians who care? And we addressed that last week. But in the rest of that podcast, they had a discussion about, is Bitcoin as a money, what kind of money is it? Okay, and they introduced sort of three types of money. Okay, in the sense that you have a commodity money. So this is a money where basically you're using a something that's sort of universally used as money. So gold is always a more prototypical example because it has a lot of the characteristics of what makes a good money. It's easily divisible. It doesn't erode. So in that case, it kind of retains its value. It doesn't really change over time. And it's scarce. So it makes it something that's good to use as money. But it's a commodity money because basically, even if you didn't use it as a money, it has a sort of an industrial use. You can use gold for jewelry. You can use gold for dentistry, gold for all sorts of things. Okay, so there's economic activity in gold, and a productive capacity in gold that goes beyond its monetary use. Other types of money is then you have sort of credit money. Okay, so credit money is where basically you use basically credit as money. Okay, so essentially, this is when you see like banknotes being traded as money, in the sense like in the 1800s during the free banking era, you would deposit gold at your local bank. I guess that'd be more of a monetary substitute. Okay, but the idea is you're using sort of debts as a medium of exchange. So you're trading units of debt. And then there's fiat money, which is just basically money that is neither and only exists because it's sort of by decree. There's the textbook definition, which just means that the government says this is the money, so everyone uses it as the money. Okay, and then if you listen to like modern monetary theorists and old chartalists from the 1800s, they'll talk about how basically this money becomes money because people pay taxes, and that creates a demand for the money. But as Robert Murphy elegantly pointed out in that episode, is that doesn't necessarily mean that it retains any kind of purchasing power. So while a demand to pay your taxes can create a demand for the money, you can still print that money as much as possible and you will still see an erosion of its purchasing power, of its relative value for, with every additional unit. While you can't print gold, and also, if for some reason people did stop using gold as money, it would still retain a lot of its value because of its industrial use. Okay, so you can, I guess you can use some of the other, you can arguably use some of the modern monetary theory explanations to explain where the demand for fiat money comes from, but it doesn't necessarily explain it doesn't disabuse the idea that it can basically have zero purchasing power. Because again, there's also just the whole purpose that if you just keep printing it, you're eating through and you're burning resources quicker and eventually have no resources, so it has no purchasing power, but you're still paying taxes. Okay, so then we're just money circulating, great, but we're still all starving. Okay, so that's that. So the question is, which of those categories would Bitcoin fall into? And basically, Tom Woods correctly pointed out that Bitcoin, when you use that textbook definition of fiat money, of just sort of money by decree, it doesn't really fit that definition. But Robert Murphy also elegantly points out that really, when you read Mises' work, Ludwig von Mises, and his theory of money and credit, when he talks about fiat money, he's really just talking about money that doesn't have an intrinsic worth. It's sort of it's not a commodity, it's not a debt to somebody, it's just something people are using as money. Okay, and saying when you look at it that way, then while Bitcoin is something more sophisticated than a government money, it may still fall into that fiat category. What I'm going to say in this podcast is that actually I think it is a commodity. It just may be a commodity. We don't realize how much it's a commodity to its fullest extent. Although I think actually some of this stuff has already sort of been playing out. And like, I guess the best way to put it is the commodity that is the blockchain itself. It's the ledger, and the whole public ledger is the commodity. Okay, so while yes, you can buy Bitcoin and use it for monetary purposes, underlying is still a ledger that can be used for several purposes. Okay, and that is a scarce thing. There's only so many transactions that can occur in any moment, and etc. And then also, again, the amount of transactions that can even be in queue are going to be relative to the actual amount of Bitcoin that are available and who has them and all these different types of things. So there's a scarcity to it. But the thing is that people think, well, that's just the payment system. So basically, keeping track of payments of money cannot be a commodity of the money. That's kind of circular. And to that, I point out some projects like Omni and Rootstock. Now, what Omni and Rootstock are doing is that they're creating layers on top of Bitcoin, where basically you're able to transact and use the Bitcoin ledger parallel. Okay, so you're able to transact using smart contracts using Rootstock, or in tokens using the Omni layer. But instead of creating a whole necessarily new blockchain, they're creating sort of a blockchain layer around blockchain, meaning it works off of the Bitcoin blockchain. It kind of coincides. So basically, if you're using Omni, your address in Omni is your Bitcoin address. Okay, and so basically, it's sort of in parallel using that ledger as a resource. Okay, and there's no reason why other people cannot build sort of other uses off that Bitcoin ledger, especially with things like Rootstock and Omni being built on top of Bitcoin. Okay, and that's Bitcoin specifically. With Ethereum, this is even more clear, where basically the purposes of mining Ethereum is not just for its monetary use, but also for the use of its platform. It is a resource that is needed to fuel this machine. The same way that's why they refer to like gas. Because you need Ethereum in order to fuel smart contracts, token issuances, and just to use the Ethereum platform. And this goes for a lot of different crypto platforms that allow the usage of smart contracts and token layers. So that makes the underlying cryptocurrency unit more of a resource that has non-monetary uses. Okay, why would it have a non-monetary use? Because you want to make use of the underlying ledger of the blockchain. Okay, now, so people are thinking, well, it still could go down to the value of zero in a sense. Okay, and let's say, because what if some people stop mining Ethereum and then the Ethereum blockchain would have no value because no one would be able to use the Ethereum blockchain. But that's different than saying people have stopped using it monetarily. Okay, so you could have people stop using Ethereum as a medium of exchange, but still have people mining Bitcoin for the purpose to use it for the purpose of fueling smart contracts and making use of the Ethereum ledger. So that can happen. So there's a separate between sort of its use and its monetary use. That's like gold. Okay, people stop using gold as money. Gold can still be used for something else. But if everyone stopped using gold, if people stopped using gold for jewelry and stopped using gold for dentistry, gold would be worthless. Okay, so the fact that it has a practical industrial use now doesn't necessarily mean it will always have that industrial use. There could always be the discovery of some metal that works better than gold and is more scarce than gold, that becomes a more popular jewelry, more popular for dentistry. Theoretically, that can happen. So the fact that gold has a sort of floor because of industrial production, it just means it has a floor absent its monetary use, not in total. Its industrial use could become obsolete in some manner as well. Like many things like Polaroid film have become useless and worthless for the most part over time. Same thing with like an Ethereum. It has its monetary use. People could buy and sell goods in Ethereum. But at the same time, beyond that, you may want to have Ethereum to fuel smart contracts, token issuances, to make use of that ledger for different business purposes, keep track of gift cards, crypto kitties, whatever. So I do think that a blockchain is a commodity, but it is a commodity with a much more volatile industrial application, because its industrial application is very tied to the amount of people. It's actually tied to the production of it, in a sense, which is kind of weird, because the more people who are producing the cryptocurrency, the more people mining Ethereum, mining Bitcoin, the more valuable that blockchain becomes. So the actual production of this commodity creates value for the commodity, which then results in its monetary use, which Bob may already be working on some of this stuff, because it starts getting into like regression theorem stuff, and I think he's already working on that, so I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. But I just wanted to get that off my chest, because these are just thoughts that kind of ran through my head as I was listening to the end of that podcast, and I had to get them off my chest. And now they're off my chest. So this will air when it airs on the podcast. This will be up right away right away on YouTube, and which I'll share in a couple key places. So if you're listening to this before it's on the podcast, lucky you. But thank you guys very much. This is Alex Merced. Again, if you want to support the show, go to donate.alexmerced.com, go to patreon.com/alexmerced. Tell other people about the show. And it's not just the Alex Merced cast, but also the Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto podcast. So thank you guys very much. You guys have a great day. Enjoy. I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you for listening to the Alex Merced cast. Learn more at alexmerced.com, libertarian101.com, and libertarianwingmedia.com. Follow Alex Merced on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.